with us and he has already logged in. Let me take a couple of minutes to introduce him. Even though he is not new to Charlotte, it is my duty to honor and introduce Rohinipriya Prabhu. Rohinipriya Prabhu did a bachelor's in medicine and bachelor's in surgery from Government Medical College, Pune. In the early 90s, he came in contact with Krishna consciousness and he joined Iskcon Pune temple as a full-time brahmachari in 1995. Then he moved to Iskcon Chowpatty, Mumbai. He served as director of Iskcon Youth Forum. Also, many years he served as a temple management committee member in Iskcon Chowpatty. He has been a spiritual vision for Iskcon Chowpatty. From 1996, he started traveling to Aurangabad, Maharashtra, and he started developing a center there. In addition to his services in Mumbai, he is constantly focusing on developing Aurangabad temple. He fills the lives of people with the joy and Krishna consciousness by practical, mesmerizing spiritual discourses. He also consults and guides many people, especially the youth. He currently serves as the general manager at Iskcon Aurangabad, Maharashtra, India, under his able guidance. Iskcon Aurangabad is a dynamic and flourishing center. He has been visiting America, North America, and Canada specifically, and he is a regular visitor of Charlotte. But unfortunately, this year, because of this COVID situation, we are not able to meet in person. So we thought of having this time, we could have his virtual association and guidance through this Bhakti Vriksha. So let's welcome 3 times by saying Hari Bol to Rohinipriya Prabhu. Thank you. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol!
Thank you so very much, Hare Krishna. I offer my respects to all the devotees who are present online, and I would like to express my gratitude to be having this opportunity to connect with all of you through this social media platform. Shama Gauri Mataji, she sent me this proposal, and I was very happy to accept it. I couldn't get across this message to her somehow about the gist of today's presentation. So the gist of today's presentation, which you could say would be the topic of today's presentation, is miserliness, specifically in terms of spiritual consciousness, but miserliness, a miser, a cripple. And the inspiration for this were a couple of stories, a couple of historical references that I was reading some time back in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So before I go further on the topic, I will chant the invocation prayers and for auspiciousness, and then we shall continue. I hope the audio is all right. I hope the video is also okay. Please let me know.
Prabhu, the audio video is perfect, so we are good.
Thank you. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahiyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschatya Deshatarini Vamcha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sandhobhya eva cha पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद, श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is this verse, there is this shloka which is in the 11th canto. First I will chant the shloka and also I will give its translation, its meaning of that verse, and then we'll see what is the reference of that, what is the context of this verse. So the verse is Prayenartha kadaryanam na sukhaya kadachana iha chatmopatapaya vitasya narakaya cha. The translation of this verse is that generally the wealth of misers never allows them any happiness. In this life, it causes their self-torment, and when they die, it sends them to hell. So, prayena, artha, kadaryana. So, the wealth, the artha, the wealth or the prosperity of kadaryana. Kadaryana means those who are misers, those who just simply store their wealth and they do not use it for their own benefits or for anyone else's benefit. So na sukhaya kadachana, they do not find happiness while they are living in this world, and cha atma patapaya. One degrades one's consciousness being miserly, being having this miserly mentality, a miser's mentality, sankuchit vritti, and mritasya, after death, narakayacha. One has more miseries in store for one. So why would I choose this topic? It seems to be a very, very dark topic for a Friday satsang program. Well, it's not very dark, although we began like that, although we began with this verse. As I said, this verse is from the 11th canto, and this was spoken by a gentleman who is referred to in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam as the Brahmana from Avantipur, or the Avanti Brahman. So a little bit about this Brahmana's background, or what has been revealed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll describe that. This Brahman was in a situation in life where he was very wealthy. And because of his wealth, he also had uh, people respect him. So he had respect in society. He was filthy rich, tremendous wealth, and because of his wealth and his the respect that he had earned due to possessing so much wealth, he was quite famous. So he had fame, he had respect, and he had a lot of money. Somehow, he was very stingy. Although he was born in a Brahmana family and he had such a comfortable life, all of his intelligence and the facility that his birth gave him was misused. How so? He would never ever practice any principles of religiosity, which basically meant that there would be no sacrifices going on in his house. He would not offer any kind of worship to the deities. He would never celebrate festivals. He would never offer donations. And he was always very much suspicious of everyone that they would come and take away his wealth. So, due to his suspicious nature, he became a loner and he actually felt disdain for all the people around him, including his own relations, including his wife, his children, his relatives, his friends. So he was completely obsessed by his immense prosperity and wealth. However, time in this material world brings about change, and in his life, it brought about a very severe change, very serious change. He lost all of his wealth, every single penny. Some of it was stolen, some of it had to be paid in the form of taxes, some of it was just lost due to the influence of time and providence. Um, some of it was uh, somehow or the other taken away by his relatives and friends. So he couldn't hold on to it. And ultimately, he was in a situation where he had lost everything. Now, not only did he lose his wealth, but because of his unsocial behavior in the past, or antisocial, we'd say unsocial behavior in the past, he made a lot of enemies. He made a lot of people, uh, he hurt a lot of people. He made a lot of people envy him. His behavior made a lot of people feel privately, these people would feel disrespected by him. These people would feel they would have negative sentiments towards him. So the entire society, including his family, suddenly was against him, and he was left to a life of utter poverty. Maybe the by the effect of his being born as a Brahmana in a Brahmana family, his intelligence at that point of time was sparked. His intelligence became functional. And then he realized that the situation in which he found himself in right now, maybe it seems to be a great misfortune. However, he realized that he had worked so hard to get all of that wealth, and he had been so very attached and careful to preserve his wealth. He had struggled throughout, and unfortunately, he hadn't spent even a moment of that struggle for any kind of religiosity or even material enjoyment. He hadn't spent a single moment of those struggling years either to enjoy his senses nor to achieve some spiritual credits. And his intelligence now made him aware that this was his greatest misfortune. So he wasn't feeling bad that, well, he was in a miserable situation. However, because of his evolved intelligence or his intelligence functional, which became functional right now, he was able to see things in a very different perspective than was expected. He considered his misfortune to be the lack or the inability to have spent some time either in material enjoyment or for spiritual upliftment. Because even if you spend some time in material enjoyment, at least what you've done is that you have experienced some temporary enjoyment. He did not even experience that. And if you perform spiritual activity and get spiritual credits, then basically you have made a bright, you have kind of arranged for your future to be good for you. So either ways he had lost, and this was his biggest misfortune. And this is where he spoke these words, where he says that for a miser, generally the wealth of misers never allows them happiness, either in this life or in the next. In this life, it causes them self-torment. And in the next life, when they die, it sends them to hell, or it gives them more problems, more misery. A similar thought has been expressed in many places. Very similar thought. India, being a land of wise men and of different languages, in one of the languages of a particular community, the languages, the spoken language is called as Awadhi. So in Awadhi, these sentiments are expressed through some nice poetry. So I would now recite some verses of that poem, wherein certain things, very, very important messages or an important message is being passed on. So this is how the poem goes. Kaula kama bas kripan vimudha ati daridra ajasi ati budha. And then it goes on, but I'm not going to recite the entire poem. So kaula kama bas kripan vimudha ati daridra ajasi ati budha. Sada roga bas sattata krodhi Vishnu vimukha shruti santa virodhi tanu poshak nindak agakhani jivat sabasama chauda prani. So this is Awadhi. What it basically says that is Kaula jivat sabasama chauda prani. Although alive, one is actually a dead person because of these particular negative qualities. And what are those negative qualities? There are quite a few that have been mentioned. We are just going to refer to one which is related to our topic today. Kama bas Kripena vimudha. So one is kamabas, or a person who is very sensual, who simply wants to enjoy the senses. Then there is kripana. Kripana means a miserly person. So because of miserliness, such a person is bewildered. Vimudha is bewildered. Ati daridra, ajasi ati budha. Ati daridra means very, very poor. So if one is extremely poor, then one is as good as dead. If one is completely engrossed in sense enjoyment, then one is as good as dead. Then there is no difference between the person living or dying. One is considered to be practically dead. And another situation in which a person is dead is when a person is a miser. And the reason why a person who is a miser is considered to be dead is because a person being very stingy does not have any kind of enjoyment in this material world. And life without enjoyment is death. Why is death feared so much? Because one does not want one's sense enjoyment to end. And death definitely brings an end to one's sense enjoyment. Now, spiritually evolved people, or those whose intelligence is evolved, they understand miserliness not in terms of just material wealth, but they also understand miserliness in terms of how one behaves. One has the opportunity to access spiritual wealth. So, when one is very stingy in dealing with material wealth, one is a miser. And similarly, when one is very stingy in dealing with spiritual wealth, then one is also a miser. And a miser is as good as dead. For a miser, his life or her life of miserliness is death itself. So one has to be very careful that this kripana vritti, this miserliness, should not creep into one's life, should not creep into one's heart, should not stay in one's heart. One should not be miserly, one should not be narrow-minded, one should not be limited when one is accessing spiritual wealth. And what is spiritual wealth? Spiritual wealth is this opportunity in this human form of life. Every single moment that we have, every single second, every single minute, every single hour, every single day, every year that we have in this human form of life is actually wealth, is actually dhana. It is spiritual wealth. Every moment is worth more than all the jewels in this world. That is how important it is, or how significant every single moment in the human form of life is. And if one does not use the spiritual wealth in terms of this every single moment that we are alive in this human body for getting spiritual credits, then one is practically as good as dead. In fact, it is stated that such a person who spends his life in spiritual miserliness may appear to be breathing, but then even a ironsmith's bellows also breathes, but there is no life there. One does not see consciousness being exhibited by the bellows. Similarly, if one's consciousness is engrossed in this miserly attitude about the human form of life, then one is just kind of breathing in and breathing out, but one is from from the uh, from the perspective of being conscious, one is actually dead. So this Avanti Brahman, he realized that, and then what did he do? After that, every opportunity that he got, as long as he was alive, every single moment he spent trying to see the spiritual uh, perspective, trying to understand the spiritual message, trying to uplift himself spiritually. So much so that over a period of time, his consciousness was so profound and deep that he realized that ultimately the cause of bondage in this material world, or the cause of suffering in this material world, is not any of the material elements. It is not. It is not the effect of time. It is not the effect of planets. Nayam jano me sukha dukha hetur na devatatma na graha karma kalah manah param karanam mapanoti samsara chakram parivartayedya. This is what he said. Other living entities are not. They are simply the via media of the suffering that comes to me, but they are not the cause of my suffering. They are not the root cause of my suffering. The effect of the planets may just be the medium for me to receive suffering. However, they are not the cause of my suffering. Similarly, time or Devata, the controlling deities in this universe, the demigods, other living entities, or my pious credits or impious credits, none of these are actually the cause of my suffering in this material world. The cause of my suffering in this material world is the uncontrolled mind. The uncontrolled mind which gets attracted by pious credits, which gets distracted by impious credits, controlled mind which tries to understand how one can control the effects of the planets, control or one can gain the favor of the demigods and try to gain the favor of other living entities. This is the uncontrolled mind. The uncontrolled mind trying to enjoy in this material world, having experienced the temporary nature of happiness in this material world, knowing very well that enjoyment is not just temporary, but it is unfulfilling. So that was the Avanti Brahman. And then finally, he focused himself so perfectly on the lotus feet of Lord Mukunda that he got liberation. He was completely blissful in all that situation which appeared to be the cause of his distress, which appeared to be the cause of material tribulations. He was perfectly blissful in those situations because his mind was now focused. It was within his control. His mind was focused on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is another incident which I would like to narrate, which is also from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is also a very, very impactful narration. This is from the 9th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is about a king whose name is Rantidev. Rantidev somehow was so spiritually motivated that although he being the king, he and by his influence, his wife and his children too, although they had these kingly riches and kingly comforts, the royal riches and the royal comforts, they had access to that, but the king specifically would never ever ask for anything for himself. He never ever felt that he should ask. And in this way, there were sometimes such difficult situations in his life. Because time, it brings about change. There are ups and downs in life. So whenever there would be a situation where he and his family would be a little down in life, still, he never asked, or he was never distracted by the idea that what could he do to change the situation. He just accepted whatever came his way. And in his case, it is specifically stated that he was extremely kind and generous. He was known to be a very, very generous donor. He would give so much donations. Dana, Dana Dharma was perfectly, practiced by him. He was known as Dana Shu. He was known as a very, very generous person. Very generous. So anyone who would come to seek some kind of solace from him, he would immediately offer him whatever material comfort was available to the king. If the king had a blanket, he would offer that blanket to the needy person. If the king had food, he would offer that food to the needy person. And his family similarly would do it. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, a particular incident from the king's life and the king's family's life is mentioned, wherein they had been fasting for 48 days. Maybe they had been totally fasting, whatever, they had been fasting. It was some kind of fast. So there was some restriction on their eating, there was some restriction on what fluids they took, and there were some restrictions in the bodily comforts that they were accepting. 48 days of fast, and after 48 days of fasting, they were supposed to break their fast. So the subjects or the people who loved their king, they made an elaborate feast for their king. And before they could partake of that feast, different kinds of people approached them. There was a Brahmana that approached them, then there was a Shudra that approached them, then there was a Chandal that approached them, then there was a dog keeper who approached them with dogs. With his dogs, and each one of them expressed that they were hungry and thirsty. So by the time the dog keepers, which according to the arrangement of society in those days would mean a very, very extremely poor person, extremely poor person. He, along with his dogs, approached King Rantidev. Rantidev just had a glass full of water with him. That was all that he was left with. Everything else he had donated. And when this the dog owner was extremely poor, in those days times were different. If you were keeping dogs, if you are a dog owner, that would mean that you are extremely poor. You did not have any other occupation in those times. That was all that you had. That was all that you did. If that was all that you did, then that means you were in extreme poverty. So when this extremely poor person approached the king, who was practically, on the verge of death because 48 days of fasting, he had donated his food totally, and now he had just a glass of water with him. And this person comes in and says that I'm feeling very thirsty and my dogs are very thirsty. And without a moment of hesitation, the king, first of all, seeing the pitiable condition of the dog owner and the dog keeper, what did the king do? The king, he offered a prayer to the Supreme Lord. And the king, in his prayer, said, Nakameham gatimishwarat param ashtarridhriyuktam punarbhavam va artim prapadde khiladeha bhaja antahsthito yena bhavante dukkha. The king said, I do not pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the 8 perfections of mystic yoga, nor for salvation from repeated birth and death. I want only to stay among all the living entities and suffer all distresses on their behalf, so that they may be freed from suffering. This is the prayer that he offered to the Supreme Lord within his mind. And further on, he made this sankalpa. He kind of made this decision. By offering my water to maintain the life of this poor Chandala who is struggling to live, I have been freed from all hunger, thirst, fatigue, trembling of the body, moroseness, distress, lamentation, and illusion. And in this frame of mind, he offered that glass of water to that Chandala. He offered him that. And the king was left with nothing. To his great surprise, the Brahmana, the Shudra, the dog keeper, the dogs, and the Chandal, all, they reappeared in front of him and transformed. They had all come in disguise. These are all the demigods. Demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, who can satisfy all materially ambitious men by giving them the rewards they desire, then manifested their own identities before King Ramkiti, for it was they who had presented themselves as the Brahman, the Shudra, the Chandala, and so on. So extreme situations sometimes reveal the core belief or the core astitva, the core identity of the living entity in this material world. Now, having spoken of these little sobering references in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we spoke from the 11th canto, we gave reference from the 11th canto, the 9th canto. Now, I would like to give or narrate a story or a pastime from the 10th canto, where is the place where you find the wonderful descriptions of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Now, this particular incident, this particular pastime, has been covered in the Srimad Bhagavatam in just 2 verses. And Sukdev Goswami, he is narrating this to Parikshit Maharaj. This pastime is elaborated more by Jiva Goswami in his Gopala Champu. Beautiful pastime. So first we'll see how Sukdev Goswami describes this. Pala vikrini tasya chutadhanya karadvayam palair apurayad ratnai palabhandam apuricha. While Krishna was going to the fruit vendor very hastily, most of the grains he was holding fell. Nonetheless, the fruit vendor filled Krishna's hands with fruits and her fruit basket was immediately filled with jewels and gold. So, a very sweet pastime. Jiva Goswami describes this in great detail in the Gopal Champu. He says, when Krishna was little, he was a toddler. So, he could just about walk on his 2 feet. One day, he heard a lady who was a fruit vendor call out in the streets outside his house that I have come to sell fruits, so please take my fruits. So immediately this little Krishna, he ran into the room where they would store grains. Nanda Baba, being an agriculturist, he had the storehouses of grain. So Krishna ran into that storeroom and he filled up his little hands and tightly, he filled up his little palms with some grains, unpolished grains, unshaft grains. So he picked them up in his palms, in his hands, and tightly held on to them. He tightly held on to them like this. And he ran outside into the courtyard and called out to the fruit lady, "Please let me have your fruits." As a little child, his fingers did not have the agility and the ability to hold on to things as an adulthood. So in between his fingers, there were spaces through which quite a few of the grains slipped through and fell onto the ground. But still, the child was holding his fist, his hands in the form of a fist, holding onto the grains within his palm. And when the fruit lady saw him, Jiva Goswami says that she was mesmerized by his smile. And he says that Krishna's face was brilliant like the moon, and his smile was like the kunda flowers in full bloom. Now, a kunda flower is a very beautiful flower. It is whitish in complexion, with a yellowish tinge sometimes. So, kunda flower is very beautiful when it is in full bloom. So, Krishna's smile appeared like a kunda flower. And because Krishna has such a beautiful smile which appears like a kunda flower, he is called as Mukunda. One of the ways how the Lord's name as Mukunda is described. The meaning is revealed. So again, Mukunda. We saw this word Mukunda, which mentioned that when we were narrating the story of Avanti Brahmana, where Avanti Brahmana took shelter for the lotus feet of Lord Mukunda. Mukunda Charan. So he took shelter of, because one of the understandings of this word Mukunda means one who can give you liberation. So when she looked at the beautiful face and the beautiful smile of Lord Mukunda, she was completely like mystified. She felt such bliss. It was as if she was totally mesmerized. So now these ladies typically they carry a basket full of fruits on their head. So she lifted the basket of fruits off her head and she placed it on the ground at the Lord's lotus feet. And the Lord said, "Here I would like to take some of your fruits in exchange of these grains." And he opened up his palm. And there was just a few grains that were sticking to his palm. Quite a few of the grains had just slipped through his fingers and fallen on. And the Lord did not even notice. He just opened up his palm, but he was looking at the fruits just as a child would. And the fruit seller was looking at the Lord's face. She did not also notice that his palms were practically empty. And the exchange, the deal was done. Krishna offered those grains, and the lady, she filled up this, Krishna had a cloth he had an upper cloth that he was having on the upper part of his body. So she filled all of that with fruits. Somehow or the other, she could empty the entire basket into that cloth. And somehow Krishna, being a little child who as a toddler was just barely able to walk, had this strength to hold on to all of those fruits, all of those fruits. And then Krishna, he went back into the inner chambers of his house. And the fruit seller, she was so excited. Jiva Goswami says that she was a Pulinda lady. This is a particular tribe called as the Pulinda tribe that were living in and around Vrindavan in those times. So she goes back to the little hamlet where this tribe used to live. She runs back because she wants to bring more fruits to Krishna. She wasn't satisfied just giving her basket full of fruits. So she goes back to her house and she's still just completely focused, remembering Krishna's, that Krishna's beautiful face is imprinted in her head, in her memory. So she just has that vision in front of her eyes. She has that vision within her, and mechanically she puts in more fruits into her basket. But then she finds that the fruits will not fit into her basket. So she becomes curious. That kind of breaks her, her reverie, so to say. Breaks her that state of mesmerization. She, for a moment, and she looks into her basket, and she finds her basket is filled with. It's completely filled with some of the most precious and beautiful jewels. And she is so concerned seeing that. She immediately empties the entire basket. She lets all those pearls and jewels fall onto the ground. She empties it and she fills it up with fruits. And she rushes back to Krishna's house. Meanwhile, Krishna has gone to Mother Yashoda and he is very proudly showing that he got this deal done. And Mother Yashoda asked Krishna, where did you get the fruits from? And he said, well, there was a lady, so I ran outside and I gave her grains, and I bought these fruits. Mother Yashoda, she was concerned. She said, Krishna, Kana, you should be careful. You should not deal with strangers directly. You cannot trust everyone. Krishna asked her, what does trust mean? I don't know. What does it mean to trust someone or not trust someone? And Mother Yashoda says, well, you should just call me whenever you see a stranger. So Krishna says, And then he runs out because the lady is again calling for people to take her fruits. Basically, she's calling to Krishna. So she's again there. So Krishna rushes out, runs out. And the lady again offers all of her fruits to Krishna. And Krishna takes all of those fruits to Mother Yashoda. So the second time, Jiva Goswami mentions that she comes back again. And it is significant because the first time she offered those fruits without actually having some reciprocation of Krishna. But the second time, the fruits was an offering of her heart due to the reciprocation she felt with Krishna. So she felt so satisfied. She was completely happy. She was so blissful. She was constantly just singing Krishna's glories. The lady, she kind of goes back to her house, but Krishna goes back to Mother Yashoda and he says, please distribute these fruits to everyone in the house and all of our neighbors. And Mother Yashoda distributes all of those fruits. So here we find, let's say, the cure to this problem of miserliness. See, when one is doing business, then one has to be very careful, especially if that is one's occupation, one's vocation, that is how one earns money. However, in conclusion, if one somehow or the other develops the spiritual intelligence by association, by the mercy of the scriptures, by the mercy of advanced souls, by the mercy of Krishna and Krishna's energy, if one kind of lets one's intelligence blossom, then what happens is that one receives an opportunity to reciprocate with Krishna. And when such reciprocation happens, whether it is with Krishna or Krishna in the form of his holy name, Krishna in the form of spiritual services, seva, Krishna in the form of the blessings of the holy dham, Krishna in the form of association, in whichever way, when there's a reciprocation, where one is mesmerized by the opportunity to be Krishna conscious, when one is completely overwhelmed by the opportunity to be Krishna conscious. For example, if one is able to taste the holy names when one is chanting the holy names, uh, the taste of the holy names has been described to be is described to be so glorious that having tasting it, the tongue would not want to taste any other thing in this material world. The tongue does not find pleasure in any other taste in this material world except the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. So if one by one's spiritual practices and by blessings in various ways, one finds its reciprocation with Krishna in any of his forms, then one becomes blissful and one is able to overcome this uh, affliction of this material world uh, called as miserly or kripanata. And this miserliness keeps one unhappy in this life and is preparing an afterlife of unhappiness. So rather than live a life of death, one must try, one must aspire to live a life of uh, bliss, a life of spiritual engagement and spiritual activity. Therefore, the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, which is so very powerful in this present age of Kali Yuga, becomes of paramount importance. It helps us overcome these challenges that present themselves within our lives, because these challenges exist within our consciousness, within our heart. These challenges, these obstacles, they exist because of our um, um, polluted desires. Chanting of the holy names of Krishna is the perfect remedy and cure for such polluted consciousness. Cheto Darpanamarti. It can perfectly and completely cleanse the mind and the heart of all impurity. So let us sincerely chant the holy names of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna, Hare
Krishna
Hare,
Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Ram,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Ram,
Hare
Ram
Rama,
Ram,
Rama
Hare
Rama,
Hare.
Hare Hare.
And count the blessings and be aware of the spiritual wealth that we possess in this human form of life, where every moment we can use our senses to serve Lord Rishikesh, the Lord of the senses, through devotional practice. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in 12 minutes over time. So any questions or comments at this point of time? So if there are none, then can we end the program? Can I leave the Zoom meeting?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanush Pranams. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Having your classes, we miss so much. It takes so slowly, so nicely, gradually into the topic, and you make us understand so many things. Thank you for showing us what is miserliness, how in the spiritual life also, we end up being miserly. How important it is to not have that quality. And Rankideva story, that Brahmana's story, a very nice lecture, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to see you.
We all are happy to see you, Prabhuji. Missing your association, but whenever possible, please come online. And
Thank you so much. So let me know. Can we can I leave the meeting so that you can go on with the rest of the program.
You have a question?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much. Very nicely you explained about by taking the stories, what is our real wealth, like the real world wealth, getting the opportunity for serving Krishna and getting more into Krishna consciousness. That is our real wealth. So even though we are in the lockdown right now, we are doing online programs, and that's how we are, trying to get the opportunity to serve Krishna and devotees.
Thank you very much, Shamadori.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for your class.
So, Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dhamat Pranam.
Danat Pranam, Hare Krishna.
Dhamat Pranam, Prabhuji, nice to see you and a wonderful class. In fact, I was thinking we can have more of your association from online. We used to have the session once a year, but now with this situation, we can have more number of times, Prabhuji. Maybe we can do something on Ramayana if that is okay with you.
Oh, all right. I remember.
It's been a long time we have heard Ramayana from you, so I want to.
Thank you so much, Praveen Gaurav Prabhu. So happy to hear your voice.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dhamat Pranam.
I hope you are doing well.
Yeah, we are okay, Prabhuji. We are okay. With all the restrictions, still we are pulling on.
Wonderful.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam Abdul Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for giving your association. It was so long that we heard from you, and especially this year we didn't get it also to Charlotte. So I think this was very nice to have you here in Zoom class today. And I always remember you, Prabhuji, because it was through your association in Boston that I started chanting 16 rounds. You were so merciful to give the class and saying that Krishna consciousness is not sentimental, it is a science. And I really wanted to see chanting 16 rounds because of your mercy and your instruction. Please let Prabhuji that I continue to do that.
Thank you so much.
Association.
Very happy to see you too. Family is all right?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji, everyone is doing good.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So, all right?
Is there any other question from our...
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I have a question, like said Grant gave the things, right? Donated everything and he did not give everything. So all the demigods, they came and they were having tests for him and they took everything from him. So why did they do that, Prabhuji?
Why did the demigods do that? Sometimes these Puranic stories, the Puranic stories that are there, we have to understand that they are meant for us to ask questions that could be relevant and helpful. And this question is not really relevant, that why they did it to him. Still, the answer is, from one point of view, the demigods wanted to see if he had any material desire, because when people, they do such kind of tapasya, there is quite a few of them that desire some happiness in the upper planets, the higher planets. So they wanted to see if that was his desire. Secondly, all of us will have to go through the test of fire. All of us will have to do that. However, for us, depending upon our own situation, the test is going to be different. For Rantidev, this was the test for which he was kind of, let us say, since there are a lot of us from India, he was kind of being tested for civil services examination, IAS, IPS. And many of us, our test may be just that we may want to pass from 8th standard to 9th standard, get 35 marks, 40 marks out of 100. And that is good enough for us. So our tests are going to be different. His test was that the demigods kind of put him in a situation like that. And from another perspective, we realize that when great personalities like Ranti Dev go through such a situation, we get an opportunity to see the glorious qualities. You see, oh Krishna. I'm sorry, my phone died, so we'll have to end here. Hare Krishna.